Right then, Forest fans, drop everything you're doing. Something's absolutely exploded behind the scenes at your city ground in the last 72 hours. That could completely change the course of this European campaign. It's not just one story. It's 5 proper bombshells that have gone off almost simultaneously. And I'm telling you now, what I'm about to reveal will have you questioning everything about our transfer strategy this summer. One involves a championship starlet that Forest tried to pinch for $35 million, but got a proper knockback that's left the player having a complete meltdown. Another's about a European captain who could be the missing piece in Nuno's midfield puzzle, and he's actually desperate to get back to English football. There's also a Brazilian who was practically sorted, personal terms agreed, contract drawn up, until a Premier League giant muscled in and proper mucked things up in the most unexpected way possible. And here's where it gets really mental. One of our main targets has literally gone missing in action, disappeared from training, can't even face playing football because his head's all over the place with transfer talk. We're talking about a professional athlete so wound up by speculation that he's having what can only be described as a proper breakdown. Plus, there's a French wizard that Strasbourg are playing absolute hardball over, demanding silly money that's got our board scratching their heads and wondering if every club in Europe thinks we're complete mugs with more money than sense. But here's what's really doing my head in. All of this chaos is happening whilst other Premier League clubs are swooping in and making our targets look like amateur hour. We're trying to build a squad capable of European football, but it feels like we're being played by everyone from championship clubs to Italian giants. Now, I'll ask you this straight. Do you reckon Marinakis has got this transfer window under control? Or are we watching a spiral into proper chaos with the season starting in days? Are we seeing the growing pains of a club trying to punch above its weight? Or is this just what happens when you try to shop in the big boys market without quite having the clout to back it up? Smash that like button right now and get in the comments early, because I promise you the final revelation today will have you questioning whether Forest are being naive in the transfer market or if everyone else is just taking the absolute piss because they know we've got European money burning a hole in our pocket. But before we get to that absolute shocker, that'll have you proper wound up. The first bombshell involves a player who's supposed to be the next big thing in English football, and the ridiculous bid that got laughed out the door before causing a complete mental breakdown. Called the Premier League's most wanted man by the Daily Mail, but someone at Portman Road clearly didn't get the memo about respecting proper offers. We're talking about Omari Hutchinson, and the $35 million bid that Forest lobbed in has been knocked back without so much as a second thought, leaving everyone involved in what can only be described as a right mess, right? Let's get into this properly, because this story's got layers that will make your head spin. Forest have just watched Anthony Elanga bugger off to Newcastle for what could eventually be $55 million, leaving a massive hole on the right wing that's got Nuno Espirito Santo proper concerned. Dan Doyes come in from Bologna, brilliant signing that cost us $37 million and beat Napoli to his signature. But the gaffer wants more firepower across the front line. So who do they target? A 21-year-old who's just been relegated with Ipswich Town, but happens to be one of the most highly rated young talents in English football. Hutchinson's got pedigree, came through Arsenal's academy, moved to Chelsea, and was absolutely instrumental in Ipswich's promotion campaign just 2 seasons ago. We're talking about a lad who scored 10 goals and provided 5 assists in the championship, then managed 3 goals in his first Premier League season. Now, here's where it gets mental. Hutchinson had a relegation release clause worth exactly $35 million. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Brentford tried to trigger it back in July with the exact same amount we've just offered, but Ipswich found some dodgy small print about payment structure and told them to do one. Something about installments versus upfront payment, proper technical nonsense that let them wriggle out of it. The clause expired on July 31st, and now Ipswich are taking the absolute piss. David Ornstein, and you know when Ornstein reports something, it's gospel, confirmed that they want over $40 million for a lad who couldn't keep them in the Premier League. $40 million for someone who managed 3 goals in the top flight before getting the boot back down to the championship. But here's the thing that's got me proper wound up. Forest fans are completely divided on this one. Half are saying we've dodged a bullet, that $35 million for a championship player is mental money that could be better spent elsewhere. They're pointing out that we could get 2 quality players for that money, or put it towards infrastructure improvement. The other half are absolutely gutted that we're not backing Nuno with the funds he needs. They're arguing that Hutchinson represents exactly the kind of young, hungry English talent that could take us to the next level. He's proven in the championship, he's got Premier League experience, and at 21, at 21, he's got his best years ahead of him. One fan on Twitter proper summed up the frustration. Omari Hutchinson is a very good player. He's not a $35 million player though. His value should be half of that. Walk away, sure NFC. But then you've got others saying we're being penny wise and pound foolish, that this is exactly the sort of player we should be targeting if we want to establish ourselves as a proper Premier League force. The reality is modern football's gone completely barmy with valuations. Ipswich paid Chelsea about $22.5 million for Hutchinson just last summer, so they're looking to nearly double their money in 12 months. That's the kind of inflation that's killing the game for clubs like us who are trying to be sensible in the market. Meanwhile, Hutchinson himself? Well, that's where this story takes a proper dark turn, which we'll get to later. But for now, the question remains, do Forest go back in with an improved offer and match Ipswich's ridiculous demands, or do they tell them to get stuffed to move on to other targets? What do you reckon? Worth $40 million, or are Ipswich having a laugh? Should we be paying over the odds for potential, or is this exactly the kind of deal that ends up haunting clubs for years? Drop your thoughts below, because this one's got the fan base proper split. And if you think that rejection was harsh, wait till you hear about the European captain who's actually desperate to join us and won't cost the earth. One of Austria's biggest clubs at just 24. He's got Champions League experience, and here's the best bit. He's absolutely desperate to get back to English football and join our project. I'm talking about Mads Bidstrup, and this one could actually happen, unlike some of our other pie-in-the-sky targets that seem designed to wind us up. Right. So while we're messing about trying to sign championship players for 40-odd million and chasing Brazilian midfielders who might prefer Champions League clubs, someone at the City Ground has had a proper brainwave. They've identified the RB Salzburg captain as their new #1 midfield target, and here's the beauty of it. He actually wants to move and won't cost us the GDP of a small country. Florian Plettenberg, proper reliable journalist when it comes to German and Austrian football, broke this story, saying Forest have stuck Bidstrup right at the top of their shortlist after extensive scouting. And unlike some players who use us to get better contracts elsewhere or string us along whilst waiting for bigger clubs, this lad's genuinely keen on the project. He's been there, done that in the Premier League before, had a stint at Brentford between 2021 and 2023, made 14 appearances including 4 in the Premier League, but couldn't quite nail down a regular spot under Thomas Frank. But here's the thing, Frank absolutely raved about him even when he was letting him go. And get this, Frank compared him to N'Golo Kante. That's not just thrown around lightly, that's a proper comparison from a manager who knows what he's talking about. Frank said, his pressing is from another world. He covers the pitch superbly and is very aggressive. He reminds me a bit of N'Golo Kante at Chelsea, and that's a big claim, of course. Frank went on to say, he can play as either a number 6 or number 8, and in the long term, I think he will be a 6. He closes everything down defensively and has great acceleration so he can drive past players. That sounds exactly like the sort of player Nuno needs in his system, doesn't it? Now Bidstrup's not exactly been sitting around feeling sorry for himself since leaving England. He's been proper grafting in Austria. 30 appearances in the Austrian Bundesliga last season, captaining the side, getting Champions League experience with Salzburg. The lad's developed his game massively and is now viewed as one of the best midfielders in the Austrian league. Here's what's brilliant about this target compared to our other moves. It makes complete sense from every angle. We desperately need midfield depth, especially with Danilo shipped off to Botafogo for peanuts. Bidstrup can play as a 6 or an 8. He's got that engine and pressing intensity that Nuno absolutely loves. He's proven in European competition, and he's already familiar with the physicality of English football. Salzburg won around $20 million for him. That's about $17 million in real money. Compare that to the Douglas Luiz saga that's been dragging on all summer with no resolution, or the silly money Ipswich won for Hutchinson, and this looks like proper smart business. It's the kind of deal that makes you think someone upstairs actually knows what they're doing. The best bit, he's already told his agent he's open to the move and sees Forest as the perfect next step in his career. No messing about, no using us for leverage with other clubs. He genuinely believes in what we're building here. His agent is the same bloke who represents Taiwo Awoniyi, so there's already a relationship there that should help smooth negotiations. Bidstrup's contract runs until 2028, so Salzburg aren't under massive pressure to sell, but they're realistic about their position in the food chain. If a Premier League club comes in with a decent offer for one of their players, they're generally willing to do business. From a tactical perspective, he'd be perfect for Nuno's system. He's got the work rate to press high up the pitch, the intelligence to drop back and help the defense, and the technical ability to start attacks from deep. Plus, at 24, he's entering the prime years of his career rather than someone we'd be taking a punt on or paying over the odds for potential. This feels like the kind of signing that could fly under the radar but end up being absolutely crucial to our success this season. No drama, no inflated price tag, just a quality player who wants to be here and can improve our squad immediately. Is this the kind of clever recruitment that'll take us to the next level? Should we just get this one over the line and worry about the marquee signings later? Comment below if you think we should stop chasing the impossible and focus on deals like this that actually make sense. But speaking of impossible transfers, the Douglas Luiz situation has taken a turn that nobody saw coming, and it involves one of the biggest clubs in the Premier League. Was practically our player, personal terms agreed, salary sorted, everyone was happy. Until one of the Premier League's biggest clubs decided they fancied him as part of the most audacious transfer plot you'll hear this summer. We're talking about Douglas Luiz and the massive spanner that's just been thrown into the works by Newcastle United in a move that's left everyone at the City Ground feeling like proper mugs. Right? Let's rewind a bit, because this story's got more twists than a soap opera. We've been chasing Luiz all summer, ever since it became clear that Juventus were willing to let him go after just one season in Turin. Personal terms were sorted weeks ago. He'd agreed a contract with us until 2030, worth $2.5 million a year, which is serious money by our standards, but reasonable for a player of his quality. Edu Gaspar, our sporting director, was absolutely desperate to get this one done. He tried to sign Luiz twice before when he was at Arsenal, once when he was at Aston Villa, once when he was at Manchester City, and both times he'd been pipped at a post. This felt like third time lucky, the perfect opportunity to finally land a player he'd been tracking for years. Luiz himself was keen on the move. He wanted out of Juventus after a disappointing first season. He was desperate to get back to the Premier League where he'd had his best years, and Forest represented a genuine opportunity to play European football and be a key player rather than just another squad member at a bigger club. Everything was looking rosy. Juventus were happy to do business, we'd agreed terms with the player, and it was just a matter of finalizing the fee and getting the paperwork sorted. Edu was already planning how to integrate him into Nuno's system, probably alongside Ibrahim Sangare in a double pivot that would give us real quality in the middle of the park. But here's where it gets proper mental. Reports from Italy, and we're talking Gazzetta dello Sport, not some random blog, are now suggesting that Juventus might use Douglas Luiz as a make-weight in a blockbuster bid for Sandro Tonali. Newcastle's star midfielder, the one they paid $55 million for from AC Milan, the player who's absolutely crucial to Eddie Howe's system. Think about the audacity of that for a second. Juventus are apparently willing to offer Luiz plus a massive chunk of cash. We're talking potentially $30 to $40 million on top to convince Newcastle to part with Tonali. For Newcastle, it's a chance to upgrade their midfield whilst recouping most of their original investment. If that happens, where does it leave us? Standing there with our contract offer and our European football dreams looking like complete mugs, that's where. We go from thinking we're about to sign a Brazil international to watching him rock up at St. James Park wearing black and white. And it gets worse, because the story doesn't end there. Liverpool and Tottenham have now registered interest as well, according to multiple reports. So what started as a straightforward move to bring a quality midfielder to the City Ground has turned into a proper feeding frenzy involving some of the biggest clubs in the Premier League. The frustrating thing is this was supposed to be our year to punch above our weight in the transfer market. European football secured, Morgan Gibbs White staying put despite Tottenham's interest, Dan and Doye choosing us over Napoli. Everything was pointing towards Forest being able to attract top talent and compete with bigger clubs. But here's the reality check that's hitting like a sledgehammer. When push comes to shove, we're still competing with clubs who can offer Champions League football, much bigger wages and significantly more prestige. Newcastle can dangle European competition, a much higher profile than the Conference League, and wages that would make our offer look like pocket money. Juventus are in no rush either, which makes this even more frustrating. They want a replacement sorted before letting Luis go, which could drag this whole saga out until the final days of August. Meanwhile, we're sitting here with our European campaign starting soon, still short of midfield options, and watching our carefully laid plans fall apart. Some Forest fans are starting to think we should cut our losses and move on. Why chase a player who might not even want to be here if bigger clubs come calling? Why waste time and energy on someone who could end up using us as a stepping stone or a backup option? But then again, a dude's tried to sign Luis 3 times now. This feels personal for our sporting director. He's not going to give up easily, especially when he's convinced the player could be transformational for our squad. The worry is that we're getting strung along whilst other targets slip away. Every day we spend waiting for Luis is a day we're not pursuing alternatives like Bidstrup or other realistic options. What do you think? Should we keep fighting for Luis and risk missing out on everyone, or accept that we're not quite at that level yet and focus on more realistic targets that actually want to be here? Because speaking of players whose heads have been turned, our original championship target is having a proper meltdown that's got his own club worried. He was supposed to be ready for the championship season opener, the star player leading Ipswich's promotion charge. Instead, he's nowhere to be seen and having what can only be described as a complete breakdown. Back to Omari Hutchinson and the shocking state he's got himself into over this transfer saga that's left everyone involved questioning whether modern football's completely lost its mind. So we've established that our $35 million bid got knocked back by Ipswich, right? They're holding out for over $40 million. Brentford are still sniffing around with similar offers, and the whole thing's turned into a right mess with no end in sight. But here's what nobody saw coming. The player himself has completely lost his head over it all, and it's getting worse by the day. Kieran McKenna dropped a proper bombshell earlier this week when journalists asked why Hutchinson missed their final pre-season friendly against Auxerre. The answer? The lad didn't feel mentally in the right place to play football. Let that sink in for a moment. A professional footballer, someone who's supposed to be mentally tough enough to handle the pressure of top-level sport, so wound up about transfer speculation that he can't even kick a ball. Think about what that means. This is a 21-year-old who should be buzzing about life. He's coming off the back of helping England win the Under-21 European Championship, where he scored in the final and was described as key to their success. He's got Premier League clubs willing to spend $35 to $40 million on him, which is life-changing money even by modern standards. He's the star player at Ipswich, the one everyone expects to fire them back to the Premier League. But instead of being focused on the new season and showing these interested clubs what they'd be getting for their money, he's falling apart. And it's got worse since McKenna's initial comments. The manager confirmed yesterday that Hutchinson's had a medical issue and hasn't been with a group for training for the past 2 days. Now, we don't know if that's physical or mental health related, and to be fair to McKenna, he's not going to discuss a player's private medical matters in public. But the timing's suspicious as hell, isn't it? A medical issue that conveniently coincides with transfer deadline pressure and comes right after he couldn't face playing football due to his mental state. This is what happens when clubs get greedy and players get their heads turned by the possibility of big moves. Ipswich could have accepted our bid or Brentford's identical offer weeks ago, and everyone would have been happy. Hutchinson would be settling into a new club, learning new systems, getting ready for Premier League football. Instead, they've pushed their luck. demanding silly money that's pricing potential buyers out of the market, and now they've got a player who can't even function properly. The championship season starts in days, literally this weekend, and Ipswich are one of the favourites to bounce straight back up to the Premier League. But how can they plan for that when their best player, the one they're building their entire attack around, is having a mental breakdown over transfer speculation? From our perspective, this should be a massive red flag waving in the breeze. Do we really want to spend $40 million on a player who crumbles under pressure, someone who goes missing when things get difficult? What happens if he struggles to adapt to Premier League football again? Or if he gets dropped for a few games? Or if the fans get on his back after a poor performance? Compare that to Dan Ndoye, who couldn't wait to get started when we signed him from Bologna. The Swiss winger was so excited about joining Forest that he was posting pictures of himself in the kit before he'd even had his medical. Or even Mads Bidstrup, who's just getting on with his job in Salzburg whilst being open to a move. No drama, no mental health issues, just professional behavior. That's the mentality you want in a player, especially when you're paying big money. You want someone who can handle pressure, who thrives on expectation, who sees challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. But here's the flip side that we have to consider. Maybe Hutchinson's reaction shows just how much he wants to play Premier League football. Maybe he's frustrated because he knows Ipswich are pricing him out of moves to clubs like Forest and Brentford. Maybe he's worried that if this transfer window passes without a move, he'll be stuck in the Championship for another year whilst his career stagnates. There's also the possibility that the pressure of being called the Premier League's most wanted man has got to him. That's a hell of a tag to carry around when you're only 21 and you've had one mixed season in the top flight. Either way, this whole situation's a mess that reflects poorly on everyone involved. Ipswich have got a player who can't function properly. We've got a target who might not be mentally strong enough for the step up. Brentford are in the same boat, and Hutchinson himself is caught in the middle of a valuation dispute that's apparently destroying his mental health. One thing's for certain, if Hutchinson doesn't sort his head out soon, he'll be starting the season in the Championship, whether he likes it or not. And at that point, his value's only going to drop as clubs start to wonder whether he's worth the hassle. Should we stay well clear of his drama and focus on players who actually want to be here, or is this exactly the kind of situation where we could swoop in with a reasonable offer and get our man whilst he's vulnerable? Let me know what you think in the comments, because our final story involves another player who's proving just as difficult to pin down, and it's got our fans questioning whether every club in Europe thinks we're mugs by his Premier League defenses, but his club are taking the absolute piss with their valuation, and it's got our fan base questioning whether we're being mugged off by everyone in European football. Final story of the day is about Delaney Bakwa and the ridiculous money game that RC Strasbourg are playing that's perfectly summing up everything that's wrong with this transfer window. Right, so Forest have made their move for the 22-year-old French winger who's been lighting up League One. We're talking $24 million plus $4 million in add-ons. That's about $24 million total when you factor in the exchange rate. That's proper money for a League One player, especially one who's only had a couple of good seasons at the top level and isn't exactly a household name outside of France. But Strasbourg? They've told us to do one in the politest possible way. They want between $30-35 million. That's pushing $30 million for a player who most Forest fans had never heard of 6 months ago. It's the kind of valuation that makes you wonder if every club director in Europe has a dartboard with Premier League teams on it and just doubles their asking price whenever one of us comes calling. Now, before you write him off as another overpriced foreign import that we're being stupid to even consider, listen to what people who've actually played with him are saying. Vital Nsimba, his former Bordeaux teammate, gave him this testimonial. He's perhaps the most talented youngster I've played with, but what we're seeing here isn't even the real Delaney yet. He can still be much better. I think he'll end up at a big European club if he continues to be serious. That's some testimonial, that. And the stats back it up. 14 goal contributions in League One last season, including 6 goals and 8 assists playing for a Strasbourg side that punched well above their weight to qualify for the Conference League. We're talking about a player who can create and finish, who's comfortable on either wing, and who's got the pace to burn that modern football demands. Here's what's mental about this situation. Strasbourg are owned by Blueco, the same group that owns Chelsea under Todd Bowley's mad reign. You think that might help negotiations, right? Maybe some kind of gentleman's agreement or favorable terms because we're dealing with a sister club? Wrong. They're treating this like any other club trying to pinch their best player, which is probably the right approach from their perspective, but frustrating as hell from ours. And fair play to them, in a way. Bakwa's under contract until 2027. He's just helped them reach European football for the first time in years. And they know Premier League clubs have money to burn after all the TV deals and player sales. Why sell for $24 million when they can hold out for $30 million and probably get it from someone? The problem is, from Forest's perspective, this is getting ridiculous. We've already seen what happens when clubs take the piss with valuations. Look at the Hutchinson situation, where Ipswich are demanding $40 million for a championship player. Do we really want to get into another drawn-out saga over a few million quid when there are other targets available? But then again, Bakwa actually fits what we desperately need. He can play on either wing, giving Nuno tactical flexibility. He's got the pace to stretch defenses and create space for others. At 22, he's the right age to develop further and potentially become a real asset. With Anthony Elanga gone to Newcastle and only Dan Ndoye coming in as a direct replacement, we definitely need more width in the squad. The underlying stats are impressive too. 5.51 crosses per 90 minutes, which would be music to Chris Wood's ears up front. Progressive passes that would take pressure off Morgan Gibbs-White to create everything. The kind of direct running and pace that can change games in the final third. Some Forest fans are saying we should just pay up and get it done. The difference between $24 million and $30 million isn't gonna break the bank, especially when you consider we got $55 million for Elanga. Others reckon we're being mugged off and should walk away on principle, that giving in to these inflated demands just encourages other clubs to try the same thing. The transfer window's running out of time, and every day we spend haggling over a few million is a day we're not getting new players integrated into the squad. Nuno wants his players in early so they can learn the system, build chemistry with their teammates, and be ready for the demands of European football. Here's the thing that really winds me up about modern football. Everyone knows we've got money from the Elanga sale, from our European qualification, from the TV deals, and everything else. So every club we approach suddenly doubles their asking price. It's like going to buy a car and telling the dealer you've just won the lottery. You know you're going to get rinsed. But maybe that's just the reality of being Nottingham Forest in 2025. We're not quite big enough to bully smaller clubs into selling at reasonable prices. But we're rich enough that everyone thinks they can take us for a ride. We're caught in that awkward middle ground where we're expected to pay premium prices without having the pulling power to demand reasonable valuations. Strasbourg know we're desperate for wingers. They know we've got money burning a hole in our pocket. They know the transfer window's running out and we're under pressure to get deals done. So why wouldn't they hold out for every penny they can get? The question is, do we set a precedent by paying their inflated demands, or do we stick to our principles and risk ending up with nobody? Because if we cave into Strasbourg's demands, every other club will know they can rinse us too. So what's it to be? Pay over the odds for Bakwa and show the football world that Forest can be bullied into ridiculous valuations, or stick to our guns and risk missing out on a player who could genuinely improve our squad? Either way, one thing's clear. This transfer window's been a proper education in how difficult it is to strengthen when you're trying to punch above your weight in modern football. Everyone wants to be paid like they're selling to Manchester City, but not everyone wants to give us the respect that our European qualification deserves. Hit that like button if you think we should tell these clubs where to stick their silly valuations. Subscribe for more transfer madness that'll probably give you a headache, and let me know in the comments which of these 5 stories has wound you up the most. Are we being naive in the transfer market, or is everyone else just taking the complete piss because they know we've got money? Because next week, we'll be diving into why Forest's European dream might be over before it's even started, and trust me, you won't want to miss that absolute car crash of a story.